United States Central Command confirmed a 5-hour mission that simultaneously struck Bushehr, Chabahar, Jask, Konark, Abu Musa, and Bandar Abbas in a single coordinated operation. 6 cities across Iran's entire southern coastline from the Strait of Hormuz, all the way up the northern Persian Gulf, hit in one operational window with precision munitions targeting coastal defense systems, missile and drone sites, and maritime capabilities. That same night, satellite imagery captured by Planet Labs and later published by Al Jazeera showed damage inside the premises of Iran's only operating civilian nuclear power plant, located in Bushehr province. The IAEA issued a statement. Iran's deputy governor of Bushehr province initially said the nuclear plant area had been struck before walking back that statement within hours. IRGC-linked Tasnim news agency reported explosions in Sulaymaniyah, Iraq. Kuwait's armed forces activated to confront missile and drone threats. Sirens sounded in Bahrain. And President Donald Trump, in a post on Truth Social that changed every conversation happening in every Security Council and every foreign ministry in the world, wrote that from that point forward, anytime Iran shoots at a ship in the Strait of Hormuz, whether by missile, rocket, drone, or any other device or weapon, the United States will bomb and destroy one bridge or power plant, including those located next to or in the capital city of Tehran. One ship, one power plant. That is the doctrine now on the table. The Middle East is on fire, and this video is going to give you the complete picture of what is actually happening, what it means, and where it goes from here. We are going to break down everything in this video, and we are not going to miss a single layer of it. We are going to go through exactly what the CENTCOM 5-hour mission targeted in Bushehr, and why striking the city that hosts Iran's only operating nuclear power plant is a different category of escalation from anything that has come before it in this conflict. We are going to talk about what satellite imagery confirmed about damage inside the Bushehr nuclear power plant premises, and what the IAEA's response tells you about how alarmed the international community actually is. We are going to cover the IRGC naval headquarters that was among the targets struck, the drone factories that were hit, the power substations that went dark, and why the combination of those target sets in a single night represents the most expansive single operational window of this entire campaign. We are going to go through the regional fire picture, Kuwait, Bahrain, Jordan, Iraq, Keshm Island, because the Middle East being on fire is not a figure of speech right now, and the simultaneous nature of what is happening across multiple countries simultaneously needs to be understood in its full scope. And then the strategic analysis section is going to draw the board on Trump's power plant doctrine, what it means that the United States has now explicitly linked Iranian naval aggression in the Strait of Hormuz to strikes on Iranian power infrastructure, and why that linkage is the most strategically consequential policy statement of this entire conflict. Stay through all of it, because every piece connects, and the full picture is unlike anything that has come before in this theater. If we rewind approximately 48 hours before the 5-hour mission struck Bushehr and 5 other cities simultaneously, the sequence of events that triggered it follows a pattern that has become frustratingly consistent throughout this conflict. Iran violated the ceasefire framework of the Memorandum of Understanding that had been signed just weeks prior. IRGC forces launched cruise missiles and drone attacks against commercial vessels transiting the Strait of Hormuz on the UN-designated southern corridor. The safe route specifically negotiated, so commercial ships could move through the waterway away from Iranian interference. Multiple tankers were struck, mariners were killed and injured, and the United States military, which had been conducting consecutive nights of precision strikes against IRGC military infrastructure, received authorization from the commander-in-chief to expand the target set and escalate the operational tempo in direct response to Iran's continued attacks on commercial shipping. The CENTCOM statement that accompanied the reinstatement of the naval blockade was direct and unambiguous. The strikes are designed to continue degrading Iranian military capabilities at the commander-in-chief's direction, and American forces remain vigilant, lethal, and ready. That last phrase, vigilant, lethal, and ready, is not boilerplate. It is a status description of a force that is actively operating at high tempo across a wide operational area with standing authority to strike. CENTCOM reinstated the naval blockade on Iranian oil exports simultaneously with the launch of the 5-hour mission, creating a dual-track pressure campaign in which the military strikes degraded IRGC capabilities, while the blockade reduced the revenue stream the IRGC depends on to fund those capabilities. And then the 5-hour mission launched, and 6 cities along the southern Iranian coastline were struck simultaneously in what CENTCOM described as precision munitions, employed against Iranian coastal defense systems, missile and drone sites, and maritime capabilities. The simultaneous nature of the 6-city strike package matters because it does not give the IRGC the ability to shift assets from unstruck areas to reinforce areas being hit. When everything is targeted at the same time, there is no rear area, there is no safe direction to move assets toward, and there is no time to react between the first strike and the last one. The 5-hour window is not 5 hours of sequential strikes. It is 5 hours of overlapping simultaneous operations across the entire breadth of Iran's Persian Gulf coastline from the Strait of Hormuz to the northern Gulf. The geographic simultaneity is itself a statement of American operational capacity. The ability to generate, sustain, and coordinate a multi-axis strike package across that distance and that target density is something that no other military force in the world could execute. Now let us talk about Bushehr specifically, because the word nuclear in the title is not decoration, and the decision to strike in and around the city of Bushehr represents a specific and deliberate escalatory signal that deserves careful examination. Bushehr is a coastal city in southern Iran on the shores of the Persian Gulf. It is the location of Iran's only operating civilian nuclear power plant, a 1,000 megawatt reactor built by Russia, fueled with Russian-supplied enriched uranium, and operated in cooperation with the Russian state nuclear energy company Rosatom. The Bushehr nuclear power plant has been operational since 2011. It generates electricity for the Iranian grid, and it is the one nuclear facility in Iran that represents genuinely civilian nuclear infrastructure that has no connection to Iran's weapons enrichment program. Which is exactly why striking near it, striking around it, and confirming that satellite imagery shows damage inside its premises is strategically significant in a way that goes beyond the physical effect of any individual munition. The message that the United States is sending by including Bushehr in a strike package and confirming through CENTCOM statements that the city was hit is this: there is no longer a sanctuary in Iran based on the presence of a nuclear facility. The assumption that proximity to nuclear infrastructure creates a protected zone that American forces will not enter is an assumption that has now been directly tested. And the IAEA's response, with Director General Rafael Grossi issuing a statement noting that the nearby Darkhaven facility was in the very early stages of construction, and that the incident was unlikely to pose a radiological risk, while simultaneously reiterating calls for military restraint near nuclear sites. That statement is the IAEA doing the only thing it can do, which is register alarm without having the authority or the means to stop anything. The satellite imagery from Planet Labs, examined and published by Al Jazeera, tells a more specific story. Multiple incidents involving projectiles striking inside the Bushehr nuclear power plant premises were recorded in IAEA event reports submitted by Iran's nuclear regulator. 4 separate incidents before the 5-hour Bushehr mission, March 17th, March 24th, March 27th, and April 4th, all produced projectiles striking inside the plant's perimeter area, with Iranian authorities reporting after each incident that the reactor itself continued operating normally. The accumulation of those 4 incidents, followed by the confirmed strikes in Bushehr city during the 5-hour mission, produces a picture of a deliberate escalatory progression, not of targeting the reactor itself, but of systematically demonstrating that the airspace and physical perimeter around it is not off-limits to American munitions. The deputy governor of Bushehr province told IRNA that several locations across the province had been struck, including areas surrounding the nuclear power plant, a military site in Chogadak, and a fishing port to the south. He subsequently denied that the reactor itself had been hit, and the available evidence supports that the reactor unit was not directly struck. But the infrastructure surrounding it, the military sites, the IRGC facilities located in proximity to the plant, is another matter entirely. And what CENTCOM targeted inside the city of Bushehr in that 5-hour operational window included coastal defense systems, missile and drone sites, and IRGC maritime capabilities that had been using the physical presence of the nuclear power plant as a kind of deterrent shield, gambling that proximity to civilian nuclear infrastructure would discourage American targeting. That gamble has now been called. Let us talk about the power plant dimension of this story as a specific strategic instrument, because Trump's Truth Social post, the one declaring that every ship Iran hits equals one bridge or power plant, is not just a warning. It is a publicly announced targeting doctrine, and the implications of a publicly announced targeting doctrine in a conflict of this scale are enormous. The statement included the phrase including those located next to or in the capital city of Tehran. Tehran is not a coastal city. Tehran is not near the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran is Iran's political capital, the city that houses whatever remains of the regime's civilian and military leadership structure, and the city whose infrastructure, power, water, communications, serves as the life support system for the regime's ability to function. Threatening to strike power plants next to or in Tehran is not threatening Iran's military capability. It is threatening the regime's domestic political environment directly. Power outages in a capital city create civilian pressure on the government that is qualitatively different from military strikes on coastal defense sites. When the lights go out in Tehran, the population that is already living under economic collapse, military bombardment of their country's infrastructure, and the constant execution of protesters by their own government, that population faces a new and escalating daily cost of being governed by the IRGC. And that civilian pressure is something the regime has to manage with an already severely strained domestic control apparatus. The power plant doctrine links maritime aggression in the Strait of Hormuz directly to domestic political consequences in Tehran. It converts every IRGC decision to fire at a commercial ship into a potential decision to inflict power cuts on Iranian civilians. The IRGC commanders sitting in front of their launch consoles now have to think about what happens in Tehran when they press the button, not just what happens in the Strait of Hormuz. The IRGC naval headquarters that was among the targets struck in the 5-hour Bushehr mission deserves specific attention because it represents a different category of target from the coastal defense systems and missile storage sites that have been the primary focus of previous strike packages. An IRGC naval headquarters is a command structure. It is where the operational orders flow from. It is where the intelligence picture is assembled, where the targeting packages for attacks on commercial vessels are developed, where the communications networks that coordinate the IRGC's maritime operations are concentrated. Striking an IRGC naval headquarters simultaneously with the coastal defense systems and missile sites that headquarters directs is a different kind of strike than just hitting weapon storage. It attacks the brain and the weapons at the same time. The drone factories that were included in the same operational window tell a similar story. The United States is no longer just targeting the weapons that have already been produced and stored. It is targeting the production infrastructure that would generate the next batch of weapons. Destroying a drone factory does not just eliminate the drones inside it at the moment of the strike. It sets back the IRGC's drone production timeline by weeks or months, eliminates the tooling and the machinery that cannot be quickly replaced under current sanctions and supply chain disruption conditions, and forces the IRGC to either cannibalize production from other facilities, import replacement components through increasingly restricted gray market channels, or reduce the operational tempo of drone attacks because the resupply rate has been degraded. Each drone production facility destroyed is not just a one-time subtraction from the IRGC's inventory. It is a sustained reduction in the rate at which that inventory regenerates. Combine drone factory destruction with coastal defense degradation, with IRGC headquarters strikes, with fast attack boat elimination, with the blockade cutting off the revenue to fund reconstruction, and the IRGC's overall military capacity is not just being reduced at a point in time. The rate at which it can rebuild is being reduced simultaneously. That compounding dynamic, current capability degraded plus rebuild rate degraded, is what makes this campaign structurally different from the kind of strike campaigns that adversaries have historically been able to absorb and reconstitute from. That production infrastructure targeting combined with the command structure targeting, combined with the coastal defense targeting in a single 5-hour operational window, is the most comprehensive single-night degradation of the IRGC's overall maritime warfare capability that this conflict has produced. Now here's the Middle East on fire dimension, because the phrase in the title is an accurate description of what is simultaneously happening across multiple countries in the region during this strike cycle. And the geographic scope of the chaos is important to understand. Kuwait's armed forces activated their air defense systems to confront hostile missile and drone threats originating from Iran during the period of the Bushehr strikes, with one Kuwaiti civilian killed in Iranian retaliatory fire. Jordan's army confirmed 3 Iranian missiles fell in multiple locations across the country, with the country's air defense systems intercepting most, but not all, of the incoming projectiles. Bahrain, home to the U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters, had air defense sirens active and air defense systems responding to incoming threats. IRGC-linked Tasnim news agency reported explosions in Sulaymaniyah in northern Iraq. Kish Island in the Persian Gulf saw 2 loud explosions from a missile strike. Keshem Island, the biggest island in the Gulf, saw strikes kill 3 Iranian civilians, including a couple and their 2-year-old child, when the building they were in was hit during the American retaliatory strikes that followed an Iranian ballistic missile attempt against U.S. forces. Power outages were reported in Avaz, the major city of Iran's oil-rich Khuzestan province, as a result of strikes on the province's infrastructure. Bombings were also confirmed in Abadan. 3 IRGC personnel were killed in a U.S. missile strike, following the July 29th heavy wave of attacks executed in response to Iran's attempted surprise ballistic missile attack on American forces in the region. That is the geographic scope of simultaneous active military exchanges happening in a region containing most of the world's proven oil reserves and several of the world's most critical maritime choke points. The Middle East being on fire is not rhetorical. It is a geographic description of an active military conflict that is generating casualties, activating air defense systems, and disrupting civil aviation, commercial shipping, and energy markets across a region that the global economy depends on for 21 million barrels of oil daily. There's also a piece of this story that connects directly to the Russia dimension of this conflict, and it is the railway bridge strike in Akala. During the night 8 or 9 strike cycle, U.S. cruise missiles struck areas around a railway bridge in Akala County in Iran's northeastern Golestan province, roughly 900 miles from the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM's official statement covering that night's strikes referenced 90 Iranian military targets along coastlines without specifically naming the bridge. But the IRGC confirmed the bridge strike through its own media, and the Akala Bridge matters because it sits on a railway line that serves as part of Iran's trade corridor with Russia and China, running northeast from Tehran toward the Turkmenistan border. Striking a railway bridge on Iran's Russia-China trade route is not a Strait of Hormuz operation. It is a strategic message that the American military is willing to reach 900 miles north of the primary conflict zone to strike infrastructure that matters to Iran's economic relationships with its two most important external supporters. The decision to hit that bridge during a strike cycle that was nominally focused on degrading Iran's maritime capabilities in the Strait of Hormuz tells you that the target list is expanding, and that the American Command Authority is willing to use geographic breadth as a pressure tool, demonstrating that no part of Iran's infrastructure is categorically off limits based on its distance from the primary theater. Now here is the honest accounting of this escalation cycle, because the analysis only means something if it faces the real questions that the escalation raises. The power plant doctrine announced by President Trump on Truth Social creates a linkage that has significant humanitarian implications. Power plants that serve civilian populations, power hospitals, water treatment facilities, heating systems, food refrigeration infrastructure, and the communications networks that families depend on to reach each other when a crisis is happening. Striking power infrastructure as retaliation for naval aggression creates the conditions for civilian harm that extends well beyond the military targets the strikes are intended to pressure. The reported power outages in Ahvaz following strikes in Khuzestan province are an early indicator of what that civilian impact looks like. A major urban population losing electrical power as a consequence of IRGC decisions to attack commercial shipping in a waterway hundreds of miles away. Iranian civilians bear the cost of IRGC military aggression in a direct and immediate way that the IRGC commanders who made the decision to fire the missiles do not. The regime knows this and counts on it as a political tool, presenting civilian suffering as evidence of American aggression to a domestic audience that has limited access to independent information about who started the exchange. The IAEA's repeated calls for military restraint near nuclear sites, while technically limited to radiation risk concerns, reflect a broader international community anxiety about the precedents being set for future conflicts in regions with nuclear infrastructure. The Russian government's formal diplomatic protests over threats to the Bushehr facility, which Russia's Rosatom state nuclear energy company operates, and from which it generates revenue and reputational credibility as a global nuclear energy provider, represent a concrete diplomatic cost to the American strike campaign that does not show up in CENTCOM's target assessment footage, but that has real implications for the diplomatic environment in which any eventual negotiated settlement has to be reached. And the civilian casualty count is accumulating on both sides. Americans killed by Iranian missile and drone attacks on military positions, Iranian civilians killed when strikes hit near residential areas, mariners from multiple nations killed by IRGC attacks on commercial vessels, and civilian populations in Kuwait, Jordan, and Bahrain living under air raid sirens and interceptor systems, engaging threats overhead. The campaign is working militarily. The humanitarian dimensions are real and cannot be analytically separated from its strategic assessment. You have made it to the global roundup section, and several simultaneous developments are adding layers to what is already one of the most complex active military conflicts in the world. The B-1 Lancer bombers that were photographed at RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire, England on July 25, 2026, are a development that deserves specific attention. Fairford is the base that houses American strategic bombers when they are forward deployed to Europe, and B-1s at Fairford with what appear to be bunker buster payload configurations, based on the external hardpoint setups visible in press imagery, signals that the long-range strike capability being held in reserve for the most demanding Iranian targets has been physically moved closer to the theater. B-1s cannot carry GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators. That remains exclusively the B-2's mission. But B-1s with 2,000-pound JDAM bomb loads and long-range standoff cruise missiles positioned at Fairford extend the strike reach and the platform diversity of the American campaign in ways that give CENTCOM more operational options simultaneously. If the Fordo question, whether the June 2025 Operation Midnight Hammer strikes achieved complete and irreversible destruction of the facility's deepest structures, has not been fully resolved, and if the Taliban II reconstruction attempt indicates Iran's continuing intent to reconstitute nuclear infrastructure, then having B-2s with GBU-57s pre-positioned closer to the theater alongside B-1s at Fairford provides a multi-platform deep strike capability that is available on much shorter decision cycles than the 36-hour round trips from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. That combination is not an accident of logistic scheduling. It is deliberate positioning for a contingency that the American command authority clearly believes remains on the table. Saudi Arabia continued striking Houthi infrastructure in Yemen during the same period, with Saudi forces hitting positions that intelligence assessed as being activated at Iranian direction to threaten the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, the second critical maritime choke point that Iran has been trying to activate simultaneously with the Hormuz crisis. The phone calls going from whatever IRGC command node is still functional to Houthi. Leadership in Yemen are being intercepted, and the targeting intelligence flowing from those intercepts is being shared between American and Saudi forces in real time. The UAE has committed fighter assets to direct strikes inside Iran. The United Kingdom has formally designated Iran and the IRGC as a terrorist organization, triggering new financial enforcement mechanisms. The coalition is broader and more operationally integrated than it was at the beginning of this conflict. And that coalition breadth is itself a form of strategic pressure that compounds the military and economic pressure already being applied. You have made it to the strategic analysis section, and here's the board that reveals what the phrase Middle East on fire actually means at the strategic level and what the power plant doctrine does to the trajectory of this conflict. The first piece of this board is the target set expansion and what it signals about American strategic intent. When this campaign began, CENTCOM strikes were focused tightly on IRGC military capabilities directly related to the Strait of Hormuz threat: coastal defense systems, fast attack boats, missile storage, radar installations. The expansion of the target set over successive nights to include IRGC headquarters in Tehran, railway bridges on the Russia-China trade corridor, power substations adjacent to nuclear facilities, drone production factories, and communications networks across the country reflects a deliberate decision to apply pressure not just to the IRGC's ability to threaten commercial shipping, but to its broader organizational existence and to the Iranian regime's ability to function as a government. That is a different strategic objective than defending freedom of navigation. It is closer to coercive regime pressure, using military force to create enough pain across enough dimensions of Iranian government and economic function to compel a change in behavior or a change in government. The Trump administration has not publicly declared regime change as an objective, but the target set being struck and the power plant doctrine being announced are consistent with a strategy that aims to make the cost of IRGC continuation in power exceed the cost of negotiating genuine surrender on the nuclear program and the Strait of Hormuz control questions. The second piece of this board is what the Bushehr nuclear power plant proximity strikes mean for the international framework around nuclear facility protection in armed conflict. There are internationally established norms rooted in the Geneva Conventions and additional protocols that are supposed to protect civilian nuclear facilities from attack because of the catastrophic potential consequences of radiation release. Those norms have functioned as a practical restraint on military operations near nuclear facilities in previous conflicts. They were respected even in the Gulf War, even in conflicts where the parties involved had significant capability to strike nuclear facilities. The accumulation of incidents inside the Bushehr power plant premises, 4 confirmed by IAEA event reports before the major 5-hour Bushehr mission, represents a progressive erosion of the practical application of those norms in this conflict. The IAEA's repeated statements of concern have not stopped the strikes. Russia's protests about threats to a facility it operates and profits from have not created a diplomatic resolution. The Iranian regime's insistence that nuclear facilities be treated as protected zones has not produced American restraint in the surrounding area. What that accumulated pattern tells every nation watching this conflict is that the international norms protecting civilian nuclear facilities have limited practical enforcement capacity when one of the parties to a conflict is the United States military operating with explicit authorization from its commander-in-chief, and when the military infrastructure of the adversary has been deliberately positioned in proximity to those civilian facilities in order to exploit the protection they are supposed to provide. The IRGC's practice of positioning military assets near civilian nuclear infrastructure was not accidental. It was a deliberate exploitation of international law to create protective zones around military capabilities. American targeting has responded by treating the military assets as the relevant target regardless of their proximity to protected facilities, as long as the protected facility itself is not directly struck. That targeting logic is defensible under international humanitarian law when the military assets are assessed as legitimate targets and reasonable precautions are taken to limit collateral effects. But the precedent it sets, that proximity to nuclear infrastructure does not create sanctuary for military capabilities, is one that will be cited in future conflicts by parties who may not exercise the same targeting precision that American forces have demonstrated in this campaign. Every state that has nuclear facilities and a security adversary capable of conventional military action has to now assess those facilities' vulnerability in a different light than it did before the Bushehr strikes accumulated the pattern they now represent. The third piece of this board, and this is the one that most directly determines where this conflict ends, is the gap between the pressure being applied and the Iranian regime's ability to absorb it and survive. The IRGC is absorbing the largest sustained conventional military campaign in the Middle East since the 2003 Iraq invasion. Its coastal defense network is severely degraded. Its missile inventory has been reduced. Its drone production infrastructure is being destroyed. Its command headquarters have been struck with the most powerful conventional bomb in American history. Its naval assets have been sunk, and its fast attack fleet is less than half the size it was at the beginning of this conflict. Its oil revenue has been choked by a naval blockade. Its banking channels have been cut by sanctions. Its proxy networks are financially starved. And now the power infrastructure that sustains daily civilian life and that sustains the IRGC's own operational systems is under direct threat from a publicly announced doctrine that links every act of maritime aggression to one destroyed power plant. The rational calculation for the Iranian regime, given the totality of that pressure, should be to come to the table with something genuine. But the IRGC is not a purely rational actor, and it has demonstrated throughout this conflict that it is willing to sustain enormous losses and continue operating on a degraded basis, rather than accept terms that eliminate its control over the Strait of Hormuz or its nuclear program. The question of whether the pressure being applied is enough to force a genuine capitulation, or whether it will force a different kind of response, deeper entrenchment, acceleration of any remaining nuclear pathway, wider regional escalation through every available proxy, is the most important open strategic question of this conflict. And the answer to that question is being written right now in real time. What do you think? Does the power plant doctrine, one ship equals one power plant, including plants near Tehran, represent the pressure level that finally forces Iran to a genuine agreement? Or does linking maritime aggression to civilian power infrastructure escalate this conflict into territory where the humanitarian and international legal dimensions create pressure on the United States that constrains the military campaign more than it constrains Iran? The Middle East being on fire is a current operational reality right now today, and the direction that fire burns from here depends on decisions being made in Washington and Tehran in the next 72 hours. Drop your analysis in the comments, because this community produces the most serious thinking on these questions anywhere, and those conversations shape the public understanding of what is happening. If this breakdown gave you the most complete picture of what breaking actually means right now in this conflict, the Bushehr strikes, the power plant doctrine, the regional fire spreading across Kuwait, Jordan, Bahrain, Iraq, hit that like button right now and get this analysis in front of more people who need to understand what is actually at stake. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because this situation is moving by the hour and every major development gets a full breakdown the moment it breaks. Share this with someone in your life who is following this conflict and needs the complete picture beyond the headlines. Stay sharp, stay locked in, and we will see you in the next one.